Thank you. Uh, on behalf of the 79th AIOC, I welcome you all to this National Symposium on Pediatric Ophthalmology, and it is very interesting. I have with me here Professor Jagatram, Director PGI Chandigarh, and who has done tremendous work in pediatric cataracts. And of course, we have so many of us here. Dr. Shreya is here, and Dr. Of course, Subhadra Jalali. And I can see Ma'am Vijay Lakshmi there. So we welcome her also here. And also Dr. Meenakshi Swaminathan, as well as Asim Kumar, who came right in the beginning and is the first speaker. So I would request him to maybe with permission of Dr. Jagatram, we can start the session and the first talk. And it's a very interesting talk he's going to give on the...
Thank you, Dr. Dhruv. Thank you. Thank
you. What is new in refractive errors? Asim Sil, I would request you to please share your slide and start your talk.
Thank you, sir, for your kind words. Good evening, everybody. So I'll be talking on what's new in refractive errors in children. It's nothing much new, as I am a public health person. So maybe you will get some kind of public health flavor in my presentation. I have no financial interest to disclose. And we start with myopia, which is alarmingly rising all over the world. And we know that high myopia is associated with significant ocular morbidity and visual disability. And it is predicted that 50% of the world population will be myope by 2050. So what is the reason? Genetic, it was there and it will be there. And what is new is the environmental factor. So our children are spending more time indoor, and that is the reason possibly they are deprived of sunlight, and sunlight exposure reduces myopia. That has been shown by some studies, good studies, and they recommend that 11 hours daytime outdoor activities per week can be helpful. And so parents will be afraid that it should be 11 hours daytime per week, means roughly 2 hours per day. So for 2 hours per day, they should be in the bright sunshine. It's not necessarily. So even under the tree is fine. So, but they should be in the sun. So what's new in it? That we moved away from the nature, and now we realize that we should go back to the nature. And there can be a slogan, let's go out in the sun, because it has some more additional benefits for orthopedic health, mental health as well. And now comes the role of atropine, and the famous ATOM-1 study by Professor Donald Tan in Singapore. It started with 1% atropine among the Asian population. Then in ATOMS-2 study, they worked with the lower concentration of atropine. And almost by accident, they found that low dose atropine could reduce the progression of myopia by 50 to 60% with minimal side effects. That was really a good news. And now ATOM-3 results are awaited. And in this study, what is being studied is the preventive role of atropine. There are some pre-myopes, like the children who are at high risk of developing myopia because of family history and other factors, or the children who has already developed myopia and is low myope at this point of time. This is to evaluate the role of atropine in preventing the onset and controlling the progression of myopia. And overall, atropine is gaining acceptance as a measure for controlling progression of myopia. And the treatment options are age-old. Most children are doing well with spectacle and contact lenses. And when I was looking at the literature, there are certain studies saying that that wearing spectacle affects the quality of life of the parents as well. So even just day before yesterday, I prescribed glass to a child and the mother started crying. So this is still remaining. And the contact lens and refractive surgeries are reserved for special situations. Of course, the older children are able to manage contact lens quite well. And spectacles, glass, of course, give the best optical quality, but breaks very easily. And because of its shatter risk and heaviness, the glass is no more recommended for children. Polycarbonate is good for that purpose, but optical quality is definitely not that good like glass, and CR39 is in between, and it is also widely used. And that recent studies about the spectacle compliance of children, it has shown that frame plays a important role. If the children are allowed to select their frames, and the spectacle compliance is much better. So that has been published in recent studies. And contact lenses, mostly reserved for unilateral aphakia and aphakia in small children, mostly silicon elastomer range lens and RGP. There is not much of change. These two are still being used for children. And there are certain conditions where there is a place for refractive surgeries, like the children with neurobehavioral disorders and children with high refractive error leading to amblyopia, both anisometropia and isometropia. And the nystagmus, there is some place for refractive surgery. Although the young adults go for refractive surgery, there are certain conditions when the refractive surgery is considered. Both is a laser surgery as well as phakic intraocular lenses, and in some selective cases, lensectomy. They are the methods applied. And now coming to the mass screening of refractive error, now the photo screeners are gaining popularity, and photo screeners are going to be used in large scale in different screenings. So it's nothing but a camera using the flash of light, and it doesn't give the refractive error measurement, but it looks for the focusing problems, and that's how it picks up the children who could have some refractive error. And in addition, it can detect squint, and if any child fails the photo screening test, the child is subjected to further detailed examination. And these pictures are simply taken by the ordinary camera flash. And the girl is with hypermetropia with the reflex at the bottom. And the boy is having anisometropia, reflex in one eye, and there is no reflex in the other eye. And photo screeners are now incorporated with the artificial intelligence. So the results of photo screeners can be analyzed manually. At the same time, the interpretation can be done by this software incorporated. And it has certain advantage of picking up children quite young, even in the pre-verbal age. And photo screening usually takes little time, so it's a good tool for the mass screening. And only thing that is needed, the child should look at the camera for a short period of time. And new photo screeners can even scan the nerve fiber layer and giving some clue to amblyopia. And especially this Plus Optics photorefractometer, that has been shown to eliminate the need of cycloplegia in refractive errors in children. And now the new thing is not new concept, but this is being applied using the stereo acuity and near stereo acuity with the TNO to screen the children with refractive error and amblyopia, because the reduced stereo acuity is commonly found in association with reduced visual acuity or strabismus. So what is new in India? I would like to mention that recently India has completed a huge pediatric school screening program. It was the initiative of Orbis, and it happened in 15 states across the country, involving 11 hospitals. And what is nice about this program is it included compliance of spectacle, and there was follow-up refraction of the children. It is not an one-time effort, and results are yet to be published. And that way, this program has touched 5 million children in the country, and we have a database of 5 million children, and every children's data is there. And what we have experienced being a part of this project in West Bengal, we included some islands in Sundarban, and there we found the refractive error to be lowest, 2.7%. And as we move towards the Calcutta city, in the semi-urban areas, it was 6 to 7%, and in Kolkata metro, it was 14%. And that really justifies the theory of sunlight in the development of myopia. So this is, I was tempted to show this picture. This is the school boat for the children in Sundarban, how they go to the school. And sometimes we think about compliance. It is a very recently taken picture. So if we give comfortable, correct correction to the children, they are very compliant to use it. Thank you very much.
I think this is an excellent presentation by Dr. Asim Seal. And I fully agree with you that environment play a very important role. And I think there are to make these children cooperative for even refraction, that is also very, very important. And for compliance, I agree with you that selection of their frame, and if you take them into account, I think selection of the frame also play important role. Problem occurs in infants where we do not implant IOL, where there is a microphthalmos or microcornea, that their aphakic glasses number is very high, more than 20, and in addition you have to add for near corrections. I think that is a issue, particularly in pediatric cataract. So, but otherwise, excellent presentation, and regarding study that 15 states, 11 hospital, so many 5 million children, I think that will be very, very interesting results.
Thank you, sir.
I think it's great, really. Yeah, I'm reminded of our long time back. It was only in Singapore I presented in World Congress 90, school myopia. And it was an interesting study done. That time I was in Simla as a young assistant professor. So you can imagine it's more than 30 years. And we found very interesting, there was a difference between the school children and the children not going to the school. So the myopia was more in school children. So that is what, I mean, which was even that time. And it was presented in an international myopia to the International Myopia Group. And it was very, so I'm reminded today what you presented, and it's great. So thank you very much. I think we'll have more discussion later. We'll go to the next speaker talking on the strabismus, and it's going to be Dr. Milind, who's going to talk to us about what is new in strabismus. Yes.
Good evening. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So I'll straight away go with my presentation. That's squint what's new. One surgery which I will talk more about surgical techniques which are new, relatively new, because we have been doing some of these since so long. But still some of our colleagues are not practicing it. So I thought I will give a justice to these procedures. So one such procedure which I feel is vessel sparing recession, and the indication will be operating 3 recti muscles at a time, or resurgeries on the 3rd rectus muscle. Whereas we can definitely avoid anterior segment ischemia if we do vessel sparing recession. Here you can see that there is a Kernow palsy, and besides lateral rectus and medial rectus, I have to also handle inferior rectus because hypotropia is large. So I'm dissecting the inferior rectus. I'm dissecting the Lockwood's ligament also because I don't access the lid retractors, and I don't want the lag of the inferior rectus. So sufficiently posterior enough, 6 to 7 millimeters. I'm dissecting the inferior rectus. You can see a white band. Now this particular prominent vessel which is seen on the muscle with a plain forceps, we have to take care not to use a tooth forceps because that can cause trauma to the vessel and the vessel can rupture. So with plain forceps and a fine cutting scissor, you have to dissect the course of the vessel in such a way that the vessel is separated from the muscle mass. And while taking suture, you have to be extremely careful that you are not injuring the vessel. And then while cutting the muscle, you have to cut it below the vessel so that the vessel remains patent and the muscle itself is recessed back. So thereby we save at least one vessel in inferior rectus. So as we know, each muscle has two vessels except the lateral rectus. So here I'll be saving one vessel from the inferior rectus. Now you can see that the muscle has gone back and still the vessel is full. It is not emptied. So it means that it is functional. So this technique can be used in third nerve palsy cases or cases where you need to tackle 3 recti muscles at a time. Now the next point of interest is surgery for the heavy eye syndromes or myopic strabismus fixus convergence. Now MRI studies have shown that superiotemporal prolapse of the elongated posterior portion of the eyeball leading to inferior shift of the lateral rectus and nasal shift of the superior rectus. Yokohama in 2001 suggested loop myopexy to unite inferiorly slipped lateral rectus and nasally slipped superior rectus. Lateral half and superior half of each of these two muscles are sutured with non-absorbable 5-0 suture about 14 to 16 millimeters behind the limbus. There is no need to fix it to the sclera, although some of us do prefer to fix to sclera. Now here you can see two techniques in left-sided video. I am splitting the muscle and I am doing a loop myopexy with suture, which is non-absorbable suture. And I'm just using half of the lateral rectus and half of the superior rectus, and I'm fixing it to the sclera. Here I'm using 5-0 Ethibond suture. In the right-sided video, you can see that I'm using a silicone band, which is 240 band. I'm creating a tunnel in the sclera, partial thickness, so that there'll be no migration. And I'm using full muscles for the loop myopexy. Now here I am passing the silicone band through the sclera, scleral tunnel which I have created, and I am passing the silicone bands through the muscles, the full length of lateral rectus and superior rectus. And then we do tightening of this particular band. You can suture the band or use a Watzke sleeve, but using a sleeve makes it bulkier in a larger eye, and there are chances of extrusion of this particular sleeve or exposure. So I preferred suture in this particular case. So you get both hypotropia and esotropia treated with this particular technique. Another technique of interest is in long-standing esotrophias of more than 120 prisms or so, and you don't want to tackle the other eye. Then while you are doing supramaximal recession and resection of lateral rectus and medial rectus, the free resected end from the lateral rectus is freely transposed to the being recessed medial rectus, thereby adding an enhanced effect of about 20 prisms in getting correction of the esotropia. So this is a free recession. Now here you can see that I have treated a myopic strabismus fixus, but there was no hypotropia and there was no prolapse of the globe superiotemporally. So here I have used a free graft of the lateral rectus, which is resected to the medial rectus. Just a review of other few techniques in transpositions like Hamilsham procedure, wherein can see that there is a lateral rectus palsy, which is long-standing. I am separating the lateral rectus muscle and I am dissecting the lateral halves of
your voice.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, sir, but the voice is very low. Others, please confirm.
Yes, voice is not there. We don't. So your voice is.
There is voice in the video. We cannot hear Dr. Keleda, sir. Once the video starts, then we cannot hear you.
Okay.
I have nullified the video voice. Am I audible better now?
Now we can listen. Yes.
So I am separating the vertically dissecting the superior rectus and inferior rectus, and then transposing the lateral halves of the two vertical recti nearer to the lateral rectus. So this also gives additional effect of correction of not only esotropia, but addition of some abducting factor to the long-standing lateral rectus palsy, which has created abduction deficit. Few other procedures which have been done for so many years now is O'Connor's modification of Hammershaim's procedure, wherein the whole recti are transposed. Peters procedure, which is used in third nerve palsy, is transposition of the superior oblique to the medial rectus. Jensen's procedures, which we do a lot for multiple indications like double elevator palsy, medial rectus palsy, and double depressor palsy. Knapp's procedure is very commonly done for double elevator palsy. Now a new procedure, which is Nishida's partial tendon transposition. There is no tenotomy or muscle splitting required, and part of superior rectus and inferior rectus is transposed to the lateral rectus. This was initially described by Nishida in 2003, in which split halves of the vertical recti muscle bellies were sutured. But later in 2013, authors modified the procedure without splitting the vertical recti, and still the same effect was being achieved. So the transposed muscle bellies can generate abducting force at the suturing point. So this is in short, I wanted to talk about newer procedures which are done in SQUIN. Thank you very much.
Dr. Malind, it was an excellent demonstration of surgical procedures. It is very impressive. Particularly, you have shown several difficult situations. I may not be expert in the field of...
Maybe Dr. Shreya would like to...
I have full right to at least appreciate...
It was more than... Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please continue, sir.
I'm very happy that my teacher, Vijayalakshmi Madam, is seeing it.
Yeah. It was a really excellent talk. It covered everything what we want to know. Very nice talk, Dr. Keleda.
Very good, Milind. I appreciate it. It's nice.
So you got your reward from ma'am. That's great. I think with this, may I request Professor Jagatram to call the next two speakers? Yes.
Now we have next speaker, none other than Dr. Subhadra Jalali. What is new in retinopathy of prematurity? I think she is one of the top experts in the country and a class apart. I think now there are two people, Professor Mangat Dogra and Dr. Subhadra Jalali. I think they are the top people in the country. And I think without any introduction, I invite Dr. Subhadra Jalali to speak on the new in retinopathy of prematurity.
Sir, Guru Vandana, Paulagi sir. What is not new in ROP is our commitment to compassionate care. As you see, Komal taking care of the ROP baby. This is never going to change and this is not new. But what is new is, I'm going to cover under some of the headings. It's not possible to cover everything, but I'll give you a flavor of what is new. There's lots new in this field. The first thing was the ROP COVID protocols. We were in a pandemic and we decided that ROP is an essential service. It's an emergency service. Lots of people in the country suddenly stopped doing ROP work And quickly, the Indian ROP Society came up with proper guidelines, and there was a lot of innovation, like this ROP box under which you can just keep the baby and screen. So, immediately we could go ahead and screen hundreds of babies, including our outreach program, and many people, could continue doing it because of this amazing guidelines which were released very quickly as soon as the pandemic started last year. So the other thing is that, we, in spite of the pandemic and whatever has happened, only a few years back, we had hardly a dozen people who were doing ROP. Today, Karobi tried to call people who are doing ROP. 250 people responded within a week. So, the community has grown, a lot of talent, lot of skills are being handled. And not only the ophthalmologists, but all the allied personnel are also working on it. And not only the doctors and health workers, but the media communicators, the parental groups. So new parental groups have been built by Public Health Foundation of India, including in our center and in HV Desai Hospital, as support groups for ROP, because there's going to be a lot of blindness and low vision. And we also started an IROP ambassador program, which is being led by Karobi. So a lot of activity going on to spread the message. And of course, now we are very happy that along with the retina surgeons, we have a whole team of people who are interested in these babies, whether it is the myopia program people, whether it is the opticians who have to make small glasses or contact lenses, the low vision rehab people. Then we have a lot of neonatal anesthesiologists who are now working in the eye hospitals. We were the first one to have an NICU in our department of eye hospital, and RP center followed very quickly, and all the staff getting trained in pediatric advanced life support. I could save one baby who got a cardiac arrest. I would never have been able to do this if I had not undergone this training. So the other new thing happened was the Rainbow trial. And so the Lucentis got approved for ROP, and it is approved for specific indications, which means that for certain types of ROP, we still do the laser. And for others, we have now shifted to anti-VEGF drugs. And the anti-VEGF drugs, not only the Lucentis, but others also continue to be used. There are researchers who are trying to use other drugs and reporting. What we have learned is that if we give anti-VEGF, we have to give a lot of close and prolonged follow-up. We have to relearn how to look at retina in treated babies. It is not same as lasered babies. And Tapas has beautifully drawn each and every baby's cartoon, and all of us should learn what are the normal vessels after anti-VEGF, because they look very different. I'm just showing few photos that, after you inject, there'll be rapid quietening. There'll be slow vascular development where you will see abnormal vessels and you might mistake them for ROP. These are not ROP. And then there's complete regression over 10 to 11 weeks. But what we have to be aware is that there can be reactivation after 12 to 15 weeks. In Lucentis, it will occur within 4 to 5 weeks. If you don't catch it there, you may land up with retinal detachment and total loss of all your efforts within 2 to 3 months. So you have to be very, very careful and learn how to follow these patients. So people have started doing combination treatment. We also looked at what type of combination we can do. Can we do on the same day, different days? So various protocols are there. And again, this is a matter of research, but it is catching up that you can do combined treatment that will reduce your morbidity and follow-ups. Then many unusual types of ROP we are describing. So from India, we have already described hybrid ROP, Roper, half-zone ROP, and these are the two entities that we described last year, a bleb-shaped ROP and an exudative type of ROP. In fact, the exudative patient, when first time I saw, I thought this is endophthalmitis because patient had Klebsiella and Pseudomonas systemically, and I thought this is Pseudomonas in the eye. But very soon we realized that there's a different entity which responds very well to injection and laser and does not need any other treatment. Then there's a lot of, plethora of devices. We have come a long way from the video indirect, which I used for my first publication. That photograph you can see here in my first publication. I just used the video indirect. It still gives a very good natural color photography, which no other device gives. But if you Google search for newborn fundus cameras, you will find hundreds of them. And so that's very welcome. And, we have been using Optos wide field. Even the FFA has been published by Dr. Mao. RedCam, of course, was already there. But what we are proud is about Atmanirbhar Bharat, that from our country, beautiful cameras, whether it is MI, RedCam, whether it is the Forus, whether it is Dr. Shanmugam showing us how to just use a mobile phone and 20 adapters to record the fundus, not only in adults, but also in babies. And, this is the publication by Olulai in Africa. My small attempt to make an endoscope, use a nasal endoscope, which the oculoplasty people use, that can also be used for taking fundus photos. So lots of innovation there. Keep it up, do the imaging, use so many devices are there. Then, of course, now we are going beyond the device. We are going into artificial intelligence. Already people are trying to do it. I think in few years, this will come up. Of course, the human touch mind will not go away, but this will become an aid to, training and teaching and, helping us in difficult situations. There's a lot of translational research, which we have been doing and others have been doing, trying to see why some patients don't do well in spite of good treatment. They don't do well, and we found that there could be a genetic component where the FEVR gene is, worsening the condition, and it's a Roper type of situation. Also, our group, Anand Vinekar's group, we are trying to see biomarkers and use the tears as a kit to detect ROP various stages. So these are upcoming. Today, Dr. Sucheta from HVDSI talked about stem cells to revascularize the immature retina and treat the heart of the disease rather than treating the consequences. So a lot of exciting things which are coming up in vascular disease of the newborns. Coming to something which is very important, it's not enough to have equipment and medicine. As you have seen during the COVID time, the program is very important. How these are implemented and taken to bedside. You may have all the oxygen, but if it didn't reach the patient, then all that oxygen plant was of no use. We all learned that. So if the vaccine doesn't reach us, there's no point in having 1 million doses of vaccine somewhere. So what we are very proud is that India has taken the lead. We now have beautiful guidelines which have been released by experts, whether it is the CPG guidelines by National Neurology Forum, whether it is the RBSK guidelines where all of us worked, Dr. Dogra under Professor Azad's leadership. Then the teleophthalmology guidelines which were released during COVID times, they have helped us immensely in retinal disease patients, including in ROP, and we've used it expertly very well in the last 18 months and had got good hold of many things. So these guidelines, a lot of experts are spending a lot of time. Each word is debated. Please download them from various sources. They are very, very useful for you to, decide what is the correct way to do things. What has not happened, and Professor Jagat Ram is here, I have been telling him multiple times. Again, I tell him, sir, what has not happened is the curriculum. ROP has to go into curriculum of school health, hygiene, MBBS curriculum, SPM curriculum, pediatric ophthalmology curriculum, nurses curriculum, gynecology, so many curriculum it is missing. Please have an expert group to develop this curriculum, because there is no point in firefighting for years together. It has to go into the basic curriculum at multiple levels. Just like vitamin A has gone, immunization has gone. So this has to go. And what we are waiting very excitedly is the ICROP 3 classification, where for the first time, 2 people from India, Anand and Parag, are on that group. And we are looking forward to that. Hopefully it will be published very soon. So thank you. Again, I want to say that, there'll be many innovations, but what doesn't change is that we will take good care of every baby who comes to us, including our own. Thank you.
I think this was an excellent presentation as usual, as you always do. And I agree with you that curriculum is one of the issue which I think you told in the past that National Medical Council this issue remain still unresolved. And very rightly you said, I think I agree, or although not much explored due to COVID-19 pandemic, I think there must be much delay in the treatment of these small babies. This is what is my feeling. This can be answered by you and or Professor Dogra.
Yes, I think we are already collecting the data. People have published both the good side, how during COVID time we could manage, how telemedicine helped, and also we are collecting the data of how delayed treatment happened because people were not able to get through various barriers and being scared or things having shut down. Many places people wanted to go, but when they went, the doctor had shut down, closed down. So all those problems would have happened, and we have the data. I think everybody should collect, publish, let us know where we did not do as well, so next time we can do better.
Yeah, last question is that how often you give anti-VEGF, whether any of the anti-VEGF you give, it is very common or uncommon?
I am giving only Avastin. I like it because I understand that drug. Definitely the usage has increased from before, but still I think the usage has increased because now we are seeing very severe cases, very small babies. They come from very remote areas where there were no NICU before. Now they are NICU, but the quality of care is not good. They have a lot of oxygen. So if it is from urban center, we don't have to give. They do very well with laser. When they come from semi-rural areas, they are very bad. They don't have weight gain, they have anemia, they have all sorts of things. They've been loaded with oxygen. So we definitely are using more than before, and we are learning also what are the good cases to give, how to follow. So I think there's a lot of learning which is happening.
Absolutely. Subhadra, very good talk. You covered most of the things. Regarding curriculum, I must tell you here, we used to have one para of retrorental fibroplasia as a differential diagnosis of retinoblastoma. That was it. So today, if we have a society, if we have books, and who makes the curriculum? It has we people. Once we go there, you know, the curriculum at this time, it was done by us 3 people long time back, which is for the undergraduate and postgraduates. And I still remember going so many times to MCI those days, along with Professor Azad was there, and we had Dr. Ghosh from Azad, and we did that. But what is important is that we have to emphasize, and that is what I like about you, that you emphasize to everybody that it has to be part of it. So it will become a part of it, and we'll have more access to that.
Yeah, waiting,
so thank
sir.
you very much. Thank you. Thank you. So, Professor Jagat, maybe we can call the next speaker, and then if we have time in the end, we'll discuss more.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. Next speaker is Professor Sudarshan Khokhar. He will be speaking on what is new in pediatric cataract. Professor Sudarshan Khokhar is there. I think he may be there. I cannot see here on the panel here, or...
Afraid Dr. Sudarshan isn't there in the meeting.
Okay.
He's not there.
Okay. We are going to miss pediatric cataract. Then we will go to the next presentation. What is new in amblyopia by Dr. Meenakshi Swaminathan. I think this is one of the field where everybody, I think they want to do surgical procedure, they want to do other treatment, but only very few people want to do this management of amblyopia. And this is a very common cause of visual impairment, or I think poor vision, at least in one of the eye, or sometime in both the eyes. So we invite Dr. Meenakshi Swaminathan, please speak on this topic.
Good evening to everybody. And for me too, it's a very important moment to be speaking in a session chaired by 2 of my teachers, both Dr. Jagatram, Professor Jagatram and Professor Dogra. And to have so many friends, senior, Subhadra, all in this session, I am very delighted. And I thank AIOC for this opportunity. So let me share my talk here. So what's new in amblyopia? Well, I want to say nothing. Oh no, I'm just kidding. So maybe a few things. Actually, quite a few things. But you know, Tabit ibn Qurra in 800 AD in Mesopotamia said you have to patch for amblyopia. And that's what we're doing now, that many millennia later. But there are a few notable things that have happened in the last couple of years, and I am here to share those with you. So we still have these unusual situations. For example, you may have a 23-year-old engineer diagnosed recently as having anisometropic amblyopia, and you cannot use the regular pedic study guidelines for this gentleman. You may have an 8-year-old child who is intolerant to atropine and cannot patch because she has evening tuition and other tennis classes. So in such situations, we have to start looking for alternative therapies. And that is what I'm going to share with you today. And everything is based on restoring cortical plasticity and being able to reduce interocular suppression. which has received considerable attention as a therapeutic strategy for amblyopia. And also, recently, there is even more excitement saying, you know, why we should only keep focusing on vision? Let us focus on binocularity. So that has also helped design new treatments. So we first start off with behavioral treatments. So really, what are these? So the first behavioral treatment I'm going to talk to you about is called perceptual learning. And perceptual learning is really a process whereby practicing certain visual tasks repeatedly leads to improvement in visual performance. And it is marketed now in India as Revital, which is a non-invasive software-based therapy. And these are based on the principle of Gabor patches. And it basically helps in facilitating the neural connections at the cortical level. So what are Gabor patches? There you can see those contrast, black and white contrast images. They basically help not only in just improving vision, but also in improving contrast sensitivity. So basically they improve the efficiency of extracting stimulus by the visual cortex. And is it the same as CAM stimulator? Some of you may ask, but no, CAM is brief and passive, whereas perceptual learning is active and prolonged. So what you need to watch out for is this study. It's called AMPEL, which is amblyopia treatment through perceptual training, coming from the University of Basel, and it's expected to publish its results this year. But we had another pilot study which showed that along with occlusion therapy, it seemed to really work. So now FDA approved Revital Vision is available in India. And this is the details of the India distributor that I have shared with you. Next, we move on to video gaming. Really, what is it? Playing action and non-action video game with a better eye occluded. Again, it seems to induce cortical plasticity and improve visual function. Some of you might have heard of this prescription gaming called DigRush, which was again FDA approved in the US. I came across so many apps that are available now on the Play Store and the Google Play for video gaming in amblyopia patients. But remember, it has an addiction potential. This is the next very important therapy that many institutes have now started offering, which is called dichoptic training. What is it? And I'm going to just jump and talk to you about Binocs, which is the available software. It is a novel cloud-based comprehensive binocular vision assessment and management. And we are more interested in the dichoptic amblyopia therapy, which is the Binocs DAT. So the Binocs actually has a diagnostic mode, and I'm not going to dwell on that. But what we are interested in is the dichoptic amblyopia therapy. And basically, patient uses the anaglyph, which you can see the glasses for playing the games. Color saturation of the fellow eye is kept low to facilitate binocular summation. Size and speed of the target improves based on the performance. And it's effective in patients with anisometropic amblyopia as long as they do not have a large strabismic deviation. And this is what a Binocs screen looks like. And they have several therapy protocols so that the children don't get bored as well. And they also have functional convergence, divergence exercises also included. Okay, and so it's really worth a try, especially because now the focus is not just on vision, but is also on binocular vision. And dichoptic stimuli, Binocs, is available in several institutes, and patients have shown a lot of interest, also in adult amblyopia. The Birch et al. Group from Dallas has come up with a lot of publications if you're interested. Next, we move on to virtual reality. And again, this is available in India under the trade name of REMED. And it's both a virtual reality with a dichoptic-based game therapy. And patients' performance can be monitored with the help of feedback by the therapist. And this is what it kind of looks like. And you can change a lot of things. You can even change the strabismus using virtual prisms. So strabismic amblyopia patients can also be included. And so if patient uses monocular perception, this is what it looks like. And then when they use a binocular percept and play games on the VR, this is what it looks like. And so this is, again, something that is very new, that is an excellent alternative that is now available in India. I'm going to talk about some really a bit obscure therapies. This one is the liquid crystal glasses, which there was a lot of excitement in 2014-15. but $450 a pop, that is a bit expensive. Acupuncture. Can you imagine our little babies getting an acupuncture needle? But jokes apart, there are lots of ongoing trials, and there are studies already shown that it is useful in anisometropic amblyopia. So monitored acupuncture. This was very intriguing, but it was published very recently. Physical therapy, where they found making the adult amblyope, occluding the amblyopic eye, and doing vigorous cycling seemed to improve vision, which lasted for a year. And I have no experience in these. This is just only for interest. But what is in the horizon? We already know about levodopa, acetylcholine. These are old news, and these have been shown not to be very effective in pediatric population by pedic studies. But what is now coming up are treatment of residual amblyopia with donepezil, which you know is a treatment for Alzheimer's. In 2019, there was a study also with citalopram, which is a treatment for depression, where they combined it with patching and showed there was visual acuity improvement in adults with amblyopia. Remember that adult amblyopia is a big challenge. And there is very recently a sub-anesthetic ketamine, which reactivates adult cortical plasticity, but we only have studies from mice so far. So it would be interesting to see if this, how this translates into studies in human beings. For those of you who are interested in reading more, I would suggest this excellent seminar, which is Emerging Therapies for Amblyopia, which has been put together by the David Hunter Group from Boston. And in conclusion, I'd like to say the new modalities of treatment for amblyopia, the alternative therapies, and therapies for adult amblyopia are a fascinating area of research and are now available for both adults and children in India. And I thank you once again for this honor, this opportunity, and your patient hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Meenakshi. It was just an excellent presentation, and most of the things were new except occlusion for me. And because so many things are new, particularly I can say this acupuncture is totally new. At least I have not seen this.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Meenakshi. Can I ask one question? What is your view about your newer magnocellular stimulator? What people are using?
We have started using Shreya, but I don't think we have data ready to be shared as yet.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of interest. The pandemic has, of course, also put a little break on a lot of these, distribution and familiarization of patients of these therapies. So there's been a big break in the last 1 year. I hope very soon we will have data. In the short term, they appear to be.
Yeah, it's very short. We did for amblyopia. We couldn't clear the strabismus, so still we are on the study. So I just wanted to ask your view if you are using.
Thank you.
It was excellent.
Is there anybody else who has a question or something to add to what Meenakshi already presented?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, Dr. Santan Gopal is, telling us about some system. I don't know, does it fall into what you already said?
Yes, ma'am.
Different systems with Dr. Gopal?
It is the same magnocellular.
That's what I asked, ma'am. It's a magnocellular stimulator. We are using that.
It is, and we don't have. He's just started
proper data. Yes.
And we don't have randomized controlled trial data as yet. And so he's not marketed it on a very big scale, but it's definitely out there, available. And he has shared it in many forums. Absolutely.
Yeah. And in short term, it is improving.
Get the data. I think if you get the data, that will be
data.
Yeah, you have to validate. Once you have done that, I think it would definitely be accepted by various people. So with this, I think we move on to the next talk. And the next talk is going to be, I don't know if he is here. I don't see Dr. Subhash Dadia here logged in. So Swapnila, could you find out he's not there?
No, he's not there. And
he's not there.
Yeah. Sadly,
so we are missing the Delhi gang. They are not somehow interested in this particular symposium here today. So we will now move on to the last talk by Ma'am Vijayalakshmi. And ma'am, you know, if you have to ask me, she is the only original pediatric ophthalmologist in this country. And I think we look forward to her talk. And she's done tremendous work in Arvind Eye Hospital. And of course, I personally have known her for a very long time. Ma'am Vijayalakshmi, please.
Thank you, Dr. Dogra, for a nice introduction.
Thank you.
Last one. Sorry, we have enough time, so I can take time now. I prepared it for 10 minutes, and now I can literally talk about it. Yes?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. You have 3 students here.
Yes, yes. So
We all are students.
I
Both studied or not. We want to learn from seniors, definitely.
Yes. So I will talk slowly. So I will not rush. So the topic is low vision in what is new in low vision and rehabilitation in children. So in the past decade, we have seen some changes relating to all these points, whatever I have stated here. First thing is perception about the visual impairment, and the trends in etiology has seen a lot. And also along with that, we have known better about the role of the brain in visual processing. And this has led to our knowledge of adopting various innovative methods to assess these children, invariably they have other associated disabilities also. And with that assessment, whatever we found the problems, and then we were able to devise, innovate a program to appropriately to the problems what the child have. And then lastly, I end up with what we are doing during this pandemic. So earlier, traditionally, visual acuity meant only distant visual acuity. We not even mention about the near vision. We just say distant visual acuity. And with that only the whole certification of blindness, everything is here in place. So, but now we have moved on to the fact that the vision is not only the reduced vision or the visual fields, but now we are moving on to recognizing the functional or the residual visual function what the patient has. So that is further advantage for us to look into this problem of functional vision. So this, with the functional vision, if we have the same, supposing you have 2 patients, the same etiology, the same visual acuity, and all other things same, but with the NVDAs or LVDs, you will see both of them taking a different time or different functionalities in finishing whatever the task is given. So that depends upon how they comprehend the situation. This comprehension depends upon how other visual functions are. So leave alone the distant visual acuity. Now we realize the vision as a combination of senses, including all these visual functions. So even despite of a good visual acuity, there are children having difficulty in reading, difficulty in accomplishing their work, academic work, because of either the contrast or glare or cognitive visions or defective in the circuits or pursuits. So how do we now the stage where we have moved from stating that visual acuity only, we are now going to the stage of stating as the visual functions as having a comprehensive part of vision, and it's not only a single entity. So, but whatever it is, these aspects are not included in the public community-based screenings, either in the schools or anywhere else. So these functions are not being included. We are now not able to recognize this group of children where we can do a lot of things to improve their thing. So now, few years, we have started screening the children in the school, identify special schools, identify their own specific problems and address them. Definitely that improves their quality of health. And regarding the etiologies, we are thinking we have shifted a lot to from causes from as a nutrition and malnutrition and infective causes to we see retina and cortical causes. In this tells us that we are nowhere behind the developed countries. We are almost near the developed countries, or almost even bypassing the developed countries, where the brain lesions are now predominantly causing visual impairment. So this is where our center of focus now has become. So also why that is more important, as you all know that 50% of the brain is involved with the two pathways involving almost all the lobes. One is recognized for what the shapes, shape and size, color and objects, and the other is for the cognitive movements. So why this is important? Because when you recognize some defects in some part of the functions, it's possible that we can focus on the other functions in the other part of the brain. That brain can be stimulated if we identify children in the plastic period. That is the value of understanding the role of brain in visual processing. And if you speak traditional rehabilitation, what we were doing earlier, it was consisting of only giving visual aids, telescopes or magnifiers or high-end glasses for distance, or giving all sorts of magnifiers for reading, and at the most giving a tinted glasses or do a mobility screening. But what does it now comprise? So breaking conventional rehabilitation, now we are into rehabilitating or debilitating on a need-based. So that is more important. Now for where to start for this need-based rehabilitation. So instead of going with the visual acuity, you ask the patient what exactly they need. A 60-year-old may need a different thing to see somebody coming into the house by using some telescope or something, or he might be interested only in reading. But a 10-year-old will be interested in going about mobility and then going to school. So we don't label them as blind, whatever depending upon the visual acuity. But we try to give either the low visual aids or the non-optical devices and or environmental adaptation depending upon their problems. That is called a need-based rehabilitation. And this is one more condition where in progressive conditions, earlier when we see RP, we used to ask them to come regularly for checkup and then give them whatever device for that stage possible, we just give them. Now we look into the future of these people and try to teach them whatever is possible with the vision what they have, and anticipating their visual impairment in future by teaching them alternative methods and by preparing them for a future quality life. And this is very best can be done by visually visual concepts rather than teaching after they become blind about using only the auditory and tactile senses. It is more important now. So what is it? These children usually, they don't come for rehabilitation as they are very early. And you would have seen children in even blind schools. They walk, they never have used the stick like this was as the adult do it. Because the rehabilitation starts only after they reach 18 or 20 when they go for vocational training, not in the schools. Now we start, because to avoid the social stigma, try to get the local devices and then make the children use as their infants. This is what rural or urban areas, wherever it can be available. And this child can be used. This is what we used to play when we were young. And this child, earlier the can was not available, a pediatric can. We have modified the adult can and then we have made them use this pediatric can. This will definitely improve their quality in their later age groups. And children with disability, if they are not intervened earlier, invariably their growth, the global development will get affected. So when that gets affected, they become mentally, emotionally, and socially crippled child. So the intervention should start even with perception of light. So when they have even perception of light, we should not say this cannot be improved. So just by light stimulation, getting an ambulant vision like catching or reaching for object or walking, that should be enough for that particular child. So what we have done is a format where we have developed a form to assess the functional vision of these children, and includes basic manual kit, what's called LIA kits is available. It includes all the shapes, shape and other recognitions, pursuits, saccades, movement, contrast sensitivity. Whatever I described earlier, these children are being tested. Though it is long time consuming, it is worth doing it for these children. And now with the difficulty of doing manually as it takes longer, we have a software has been developed. It's called Vision Intervention Kit for specially needed children. And this is iPad, any iPad can be used. And all the tests, whatever, it has got at least around 20 tests, which is from which we can detect almost all the functions under the functional vision assessment. And this also can be used for the training also. The parents, even they can assess, if you could tell them they do these exercises, they can do it at home. And what is this Dignify? This is a recent one, where this is to train these people use mobile for reading a book. And this is very good in reading, because it goes, even if you stop, you can stop, go back to the, if you want to go back to the previous page, it can go. You can fast forward, you can stop and ask for the spelling. So everything can be done with that. It's got a stand, you can keep the book, and then you put the mobile on the top of it, and then read. So this is a long video. And the next thing is training them in computer technology. This is because without this technology, these people cannot be placed in any company in a normally working companies. So this is what now we focus is the stand, the mobile phone, and the book, they keep it down. And this, this child is a sibling of the older child. And this child wanted to try. We thought this child may not be able to do it. She's only 5-year-old, a case of LCA. And then she fantastically improved it in computer training. Usually we give around 60 hours of computer training in all the NVDA aspects. And then we give a certificate along with the non-profit organizations. And these people are ready for going for jobs. This child can read, can go to normal school with the laptop and then do anything what the child wants. So they choose what they want. We cannot dictate this child may not be possible to do the rehabilitation. And what is this? Now this artificial intelligence has come everywhere. And now this is called Arkham, so spectacles. With the spectacles, you can read, you can recognize faces, you can see, and then you can photograph, you can have a memory card, and it recognizes, once you do it, keep a photo inside, it can tell you, oh, somebody is there, or Dr. Vijayalakshmi is there, or Dr. Azim is there in front of you, or a male is there, a female is there. But this is very expensive. But recently, India, in Bangalore-based company, they have come out with this smart vision spectacles, which is very good to use it. And people are happy about it. And what about now the children who are already in Braille? This Orbit reader has come recently, which can translate, which can print out Braille into normal print or a normal print into a Braille. But see how long they have to press for the Braille. Braille needs a lot of pressure to type it. So this is very difficult to type everything. So in Braille books, they can easily copy it in this Orbit reader, and then they can read. And a normal book also can be done in other ways also. So in general, what is it? The stereotype of giving only low visual aids or NVDAs should be done on need-based, with the background of mainstreaming them into a general population and making them do any job given to them as a normal individual. So, but after COVID, what we did was we could not get the patients because they, the difficulties. So we started doing online computer training. The same amount of 60 hours training we were giving online, and also the vision therapy. What children with CP or PVL, whatever patients, and this teacher, the special educator is there, and the child. Earlier we tried WhatsApp. Now we are trying with Zoom, and it seems to be working well because we don't lose the contact. Continuously they are getting, otherwise they go back to the, yes, I am finishing. So as a clinician now, Subhatra said there is a lacuna that we should do something. So what we should do as a clinician, this should be done. And as we do, maybe we should work with the neonatologists or pediatricians to develop some program where the children discharged from NICUs have a long-term follow-up to identify these children at the earliest and refer them. So that should be our motive or a take-home point for all of you, those who are in the program side, to plan for the programs. If we achieve that, I think the early identification will be very nice, and then influence on the quality of life will be much better for these children. Thank you very much for giving me time and giving me this opportunity to talk to you. And this topic has become a passionate one for me recently, rather than the surgeries.
Great, ma'am. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
I think this is one area. Anyway, Professor Jagatram is here, but that we need somehow. I think he's gone. To incorporate this. This is never been part of anywhere, and especially if we look at, these are all efforts from the non-government institutions. Otherwise, if you talk of the government, mostly in the institution, it is not even talked in passing. That is what is happening, and that is what we need to incorporate with everything, whatever is happening, and so many advances. I think we can give such a great normal life to all these children, and we need it more than anybody else for this country, but it needs to be on a larger scale, which is very, very important. Thank you, ma'am, for your...
I think Subhatra will agree that all these ROP children, the low weight babies survive because of neonatal increased care, but they also have associated periventricular leukomalacia has become more and more common in these children and with the cognitive visual dysfunctions. And early, they improve, like they become final. Though it says they improve normally, improve good, but our intervention will make them better in quality. So I think yes.
I just want to add two small things, madam. One, I told in previous session also that all doctors, when they send for rehab, they should send with same smile and same enthusiasm as they advise surgery, as they advise patching, as they advise any treatment. If now you're blind, go to the rehab, then it's not motivation. Give them, say, this is the way you have to go to rehab, it will build his life, he will have a normal school, he will marry, you go and meet people there. So if you refer like that, then that you have set the stage for success of that rehab.
Yes.
So, and I think again, Dr. Jagatram is here. This needs to be in the curriculum of ophthalmologists. They should have posting in rehab, low vision, anybody. It's not only about pediatric ophthalmology, glaucoma patients, diabetic retinopathy patients, even failed cataract surgery, AMD. So it should be in the mainstream. People should go and see it. I still find even young doctors telling the parents that, don't make him use the computer क्योंकि अभी already weak आई है, अभी और weak हो जाएगी. आपके बच्चे को कोलोबोमा है, अब उसको पढ़ाओ लिखाओ मत, उसको सब्जी की दुकान पे बिठा दो. So we have to break these stereotypes, we have to break these walls and make it mainstream and make it very, very glamorous.
Yes, we at Aravind Eye Care System make sure that all pediatric ophthalmology fellows are get exposed to low vision rehabilitation, and also all the residents get focused.
Yeah, we also have that, but as Dr. Douglas said, it has to come into the government system.
Yes, that is what I said. Yes,
See,
Dr. Meenakshi wants to say something.
Ma'am, I just have a question.
Just a minute, Dr.
Is available for other institutions?
Shreya, just a minute, please. Dr. Meenakshi wanted to say something.
Okay, she wanted to say something.
Thank you, Dr. Guru. I first wanted to say namaste to Dr. Vijay Lakshmi.
Thank you, ma'am.
And how much we look up to you and how much we miss you nowadays.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing your wisdom as always. I just wanted to add that what we have been trying to do in Shankar Nethralaya is to sensitize the optometrists who do the work to ask screening questions. So they have a little trigger going off, a little bell when they hear that the child was either premature or was in the NICU or had ROP treated or had a stormy perinatal course. Any of these things is a little trigger that goes off, and then they ask screening questions, like you mentioned, to find out if there is a possibility of functional vision problems. Simple questions like, does the child have problem walking down and up the stairs? Is the child even interested in television? Is the child able to identify you in a crowd? Is it able to pick up an object in a clutter? So I'm sure, Dr. Vijay Lakshmi, you very beautifully elaborated. So just a few screening questions that can be asked at the time of the initial workup to any of these patients who are at risk for CVI. We will be able to pick these up. The second thing, just as you were talking about vision therapy during the pandemic, we too have a YouTube channel called Punar Netra. That is, a new vision or a vision again to guide these patients in home-based vision therapy if they are not able to come back for follow-ups and not able to come back on scheduled visits. So I request all of you to take a look at Punar Netra, give us your feedback, how we can get better, how we can improve things. But I completely agree, Shubhadra, too, what you've been saying, that it is after ROP, after care is as much important and it is often overlooked.
Shreya.
It was earlier available, Meenakshi, in Google Play Store. It was free. The people, those who helped us in developing the software, they did allow. But now the company has changed. This was Mindtree. Now it has gone to the other company, and they've been stopped. And we are trying to put it in our website from our own channel for patients to have free. That will tell us about assessment of the functions, which function is difficult, and then go with what exercises to go with that. So that is available in And also Jagatram is there. The community awareness about earlier, we say the residual vision should be kept intact, should not use the residual vision. Parents are under the belief, if high myopes, you go on reading, you will spoil your eyes more. So that myths, how do we make aware of the professionals to disseminate this awareness to the community, where residual vision can be used, should be used for the quality. So that's also something I think, apart from networking with the NSAUs, and this should also be take home. Shreya, you were asking something.
No, that same question I was asking. Vikas is available for other institute or not? But
yes. It soon will be available in the.
Just 1 minute, I wanted to share that my son did not cry at birth. He was 26 weeks and 1.3 kg, and he had all sorts of eye examinations done right from birth, including multiple UAs, fields, color, everything was normal. At 19, 20 years of age, he was doing a physics experiment, and he's a topper, but he could not pass that experiment. In spite of him being with us in the ophthalmology department so many times, and he was a subject for so many studies, the physics teacher picked up that this child is not able to see things in perspective. He doesn't have the ability to see things in perspective. So if, he would keep something up on the edge, and he could not make sure that this is the same thing. So, everything else is normal. He's a big tennis player. But, he had this deficit, which we picked up only many years later. And of course, then they pardoned him for that test and he passed very well. But I'm just saying that, the tests which we do, we don't check for perspective, and it's not required in day-to-day life.
Yes.
So, but we have to see what test, what function.
And the concept of visual acuity alone should go. The concept of multiple factors into it, that should come into vogue. Then the things will get better. It's not only the acuity, there are so many other things to be looked into.
Dr. Jitendra has not talked yet, and he's been with us. I think he has to contribute something here.
No, it's I just wanted to add, it's an absolute pleasure and honor to see Madam after such a long time. And it is wonderful that she is speaking on something which is very close to her heart. When we were doing the fellowship, we were given the opportunity to work in low vision aid, just to become, as she said, as Subhadra Madam also added, that we should be sensitive. See, the sense of sensitization is very important. Once we know, only then we look into the patients whether this particular thing. So even that physics teacher who picked up that the kid doesn't, that perception is not there, must have been sensitized at some point of time, and only then, we keep on looking for these small things which may be very, we may miss out because we completely, as Vijay Madam said, we completely look for visual acuity. We see for whether they have 20/20 vision and what is their vision and move ahead. Hardly, it is very rare. I think pediatric ophthalmologists are blessed that way, especially since we were taught that, you should be more sensitive. And once you are sensitive, you keep looking for these things. So an absolute pleasure, Madam. It's an absolute honor that we could, wonderful talk. It was really an eye-opener. We have been using the Vikas app. It is available on Play Store. So it can be easily downloaded if somebody wants to download it. It's a good.
Yeah. I was just asking because we are using the LIA, you said. We're still using. So I just wanted to.
I think I can say that this was absolutely impressive talk by Dr. Vijaya Lakshmi, and everything, I think, practical.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. See, only this morning I received a mail from AIOS saying that I am supposed to talk in this symposium, but was not given a topic. So I said, I am at home, not going to the hospital because of this pandemic, and I may not be able to do justice for it. Only this morning, I received a communication from Parikshit saying, this is the topic, madam. So when I saw the topic, I said, oh, I should do it. So for the people, if it was something on strabismus pediatric catarrh, I would have said, no, I'm not doing it. So, but I thought because this is the thing, then now I want to have all the youngsters to spread this, go out with this knowledge. So I thought I should do it. So since morning, I have been working on this, continuously to get the PowerPoint ready.
Great,
everybody knows really what is your passion, madam.
Yes.
You see, after I'm not doing surgeries for the past 3-4 years. So after I stopped the surgeries, even before I was planning, I was telling my HOD Sashikant is only 1 or 2 years more, then I will be stopping immediately. Then I will be shifting myself from pediatric ophthalmology to Vision Rehabilitation Center. So my name is there in pediatric ophthalmology, but I am there sitting now in Vision Rehabilitation Center and trying to improve the conditions, which is the area which is we didn't have time to look into. Now I have time to look into. Other people are there in pediatric ophthalmology. So my concentration is now on getting training or giving training or getting the department expanded more and more. We have developed a kitchen. Computer training is going on very well with the international help.
Very good, ma'am. I think.
And this online trainings. So I think that what we said, the passion should come inside, from inside. Then this is the retirement project.
So companies are funding because Satyam Computers has funded us, TCS has funded us. So companies are funding. So those who are interested in setting up computer trainings and all, the companies, the IT companies, they're very happy to put it there. And even they come as volunteers on their, giving day, and they have a lot of programs for their staff to volunteer in these areas. And they give it as a part of their CSR. So, it's a very good partnership.
We have been in tie-up with those people also.
In fact, because of the two extremes of ages which we have, we never had premature babies in this country surviving because we were quite primitive. And so was the aging, ma'am. So the demand is so much for the low vision now and rehabilitation, which is kind of is going to go beyond everything. And we don't think when we need it. I think your work at this time will help, and it has to be somehow, even Professor Jagat is here, it has to be incorporated into somehow our mainstream program. And if it is not incorporated, we're going to face big challenges, because these were not our problem if we go back to our younger days. You see, people were, younger children were not surviving, premature children were hardly not there. And so were the older generation, the very old people were not there. We hardly had people, those who were almost going to a stage where they used to become handicapped because of the age-related degeneration. Now their number is so high. So that is what I think, it's a great work, ma'am, you have taken up. I think somehow it has to be brought onto the national stream, and we have to definitely make it as like a moment. And I would request Professor Jagatram to work on this direction, because he has been very much interested in the pediatric cataract, especially. I think maybe maximum number he has done. He has seen all, and he has been very passionate about that. And all of us here, the entire group, we have to somehow work in this neglected area. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. This is why I wanted to talk today.
Definitely. Final comments, Professor Jagat. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. It was a pleasure to listen to so many talks, starting from Dr. Asim Seal, Dr. Maylin, Dr. Subhadra Jalali, and Dr. Meenakshi, and then Dr. Vijaya Lakshmi. It was a great honor for us to listen to so many speakers. And on behalf of IOS and this session, I am thankful to our chairman, Professor Dogra, and my colleague, Dr. Shreya Shah, and Dr. Jitendra Jathani, who joined us. And but we could not speak on the pediatric cataract. Otherwise, my talk was ready, but I thought that because I was not given this talk, so I don't speak. So thank you so much. Any final word from Professor Dogra?
Thank you, Professor Jagatram, and thank you everybody. and especially here,
Thank you.
Madam Vijayalakshmi ma'am, again, she
Thank
being
you. Thank
the senior most and the driving force, and all the other. It was a great.
सर आप कल्चरल प्रोग्राम में चलिए, उधर मेरा डांस भी चल रहा है.
Okay,
और
all
भी
right.
पर मुझे डांस करना था, अब नहीं है, लेकिन अभी जाएंगे तो उधर मेरा डांस होने वाला है.
And we have seen ma'am dancing. She danced very well.
I know.
मेरा वीडियो आएगा. चलिए.
She does
All the best.
it so well. What she does in life, she has to do all the way.
So many things to learn from both.
Good.
So with this, I think we can call it sort of close this session. I think we had a great session. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
everyone, again.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for the great insights that you have shared with us, and also for waiting back for so long to share your experience and your expertise. Thank you for all for being the part of the 79th AIOC virtual conference. We conclude this call now.